Committee to order for Tuesday, November 24th, 2009. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Yes, sir. Chairman Andrupon?
Here.
Mrs. Griffin?
Present.
Mr. Hassett? Dr. Mackey's out of town this evening. Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Spell?
Here.
And Mr. Stelly. You do have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me set the ground rules for the day, if I could. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. The speakers will be in this order: Wayne Harris from Meyer & Associates, Richard Meyer from Meyer & Associates, Claude Smart, and then Brian Beam. I would ask that you hold your questions until each speaker has completed his address to the committee. And I would ask that you stay focused on the issue that we're going to be discussing today. And we've come a long way, guys, and we have a long way to go as far as I'm concerned. I hate to use the phrase jigsaw puzzle, but we have a lot of pieces that are still not put in place. I appreciate the concern and the interest from the committee that you've shown in the past, and I know you'll continue to do that in the future. The one thing that I want to reiterate, as I have in the past, is at 5:20, we will adjourn this meeting. We have no choice in light of the fact that we have another meeting coming up at 5:30. So that being said, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a good introduction. Just so before Wayne comes up, just sort of give you an overview. Some of the information which you'll receive tonight, and there's a lot of good news as far as information to be delivered. What you do with it, what we do with it is the next step. But some of it is new, which is good. That's why you commission these studies. Some of it is information we anticipated, but it was confirmed, and it's always important to do before you go and take any action by outside sources that do this every day. So we, as Mr. Andrupont stated, we feel like there's a lot of information we need to gather, and that gives us the ability then to analyze it. What does it mean? Where do we go from here? I've heard the phrase jigsaw puzzle. That's a good one. Mark has referred to this as a spaghetti bowl. The wastewater issue is very complex. That's no secret, but it needs to be stated, I think. This is a multi-tiered effort that has no cookie-cutter solutions, but we're working through it, and I believe tonight is a big step toward that. And well, let's go ahead and get started. I'll introduce Wayne Harris with Meyer & Associates, who will lead off.
Name and address for the record, please.
Wayne Harris, 1807 Honeysuckle, Sulphur, Louisiana. Tonight I wanted to tender, and I put copies of the transmittal letter in front of each committee member and along with staff. We delivered 2 complete sets of wastewater facility plans for the parish-wide wastewater plan report. If over here is 1 complete set, it's 22 volumes. Now the administration has asked that we do another volume or 2 that we'll be adding on here. It'll be a master executive summary. But basically, this particular facility plan is 17 different facility plans for 17 particular study areas. We have the executive summaries with the recommended centralized wastewater treatment facilities and transport. That's all that these particular reports evaluate. In the master executive summary, we're basically going to take the executive summaries from these 17 areas, and we'll combine them in an abbreviated form along with a tabulated cost. But the purpose of separating these out is so you can pull these individually, submit them to different funding agencies, or combine them. But if you'll bear with me, I'll go through what has been submitted. And this is 2 complete sets. We have 8 more sets that will be delivered next week after we get through running them through production. The first volume is we evaluated the existing wastewater transport facilities. We've previously discussed some of these reports. The evaluation of the existing wastewater treatment facilities within the parish, evaluation of the population projections, evaluation of future wastewater flow projections, evaluation of alternatives for wastewater facility improvements. The next 17 reports, we've kind of given them to you in pieces, but it's the 17 executive summaries for the study areas of the various wards, and there's several study areas within particular wards. But we have an executive summary and implementation schedule for Ward 1, which is the Moss Bluff area. And I don't know if you recall, but at our prior meetings, we talked about the phase construction. All of that is called out in this particular report. We also have the executive summary and implementation schedule for Ward 2. We have the executive summary and implementation schedule for Ward 3, which is study area 3A. That's the Prion census-defined place. That's one particular study area. We have the, another report for study area 3B and 3C, which is just south of Lake Charles, the South Lake Charles area. Executive summary 3D, which is the Black Bayou, Deaton, Big Lake area. The next one is Sewerage District number 11, and as I understand the parish now, you have just turned that back over to that board, I believe, if that's not correct. But at the time, the parish was operating that particular facility and maintaining it, and I believe the board is now active on that. But we did finalize that report. Study for Area 3F, which is the Old Town Road area. In Ward 4, we have studies for the North Carlis area, the North Westlake area, the South Carlis area, North Sulphur, North Mossville, and the Houston River Road area. And the Houston River Road report also includes the High Hope Road area. Ward 5, Ward 6, Ward 7, and Ward 8. I've also handed out, it's basically the covers of each one of these executive summary reports that are used as divider pages. We've gone through all the capital costs in prior meetings. I don't want to go through them again unless there's specific ones that you want to discuss. But if you follow behind them, like I start out with Ward 1, well then here's the summary sheet of the cost, the capital cost for the project broken out by phase and by parts. So that goes on for all 17 studies. The total of all of those is $431 million, and that's the number we have discussed in the past. However, you can break these reports down into individual and submit them to either DEQ for revolving loan funding, or should there be any kind of grant funding through rural utility services or any CDBG, then these reports could be submitted as standalone to these particular agencies. With DEQ, this is set up in the way that their format is required for their approval of facility planning. Basically, that report is complete for them with the exception of an environmental information document, which you would have to do. With regard to the executive summary reports, Mark, would you want me to kind of go through how I set those up? Okay. In each one of those plans, I have a section 1, which is the executive summary for each of the 17 study areas. And this particular report, the executive summary report, it addresses the recommended centralized wastewater treatment management plan for that area, the recommended centralized wastewater transport and collection management plan, the capital cost of the recommended plans, potential methods for program financing, the probable user fee requirements for those facilities, which it also addresses debt service and operation and maintenance cost. There is some discussion about the LDEQ revolving loan program, which is typical for these types of projects. And we also provide some concept economic benchmarks. EPA has established some guidance where you look at the individual projects as far as the cost of the project versus the number of users that are served. If it's above a certain target area, it's a target amount, it's considered a high-cost project, so you should really consider whether you should proceed ahead with that project or not. Also, they have, based on the census data for the average annual median family income, household income, what is a high user fee per residence if you were charging. So we looked at those with regard to both the operation and maintenance, and if you had to pay out of the user fee a portion or all of the debt service if you had to borrow the money. And we looked at it at different funding levels. Do you want me to go through each particular report, Mark? That'd take a little bit of time to do.
Kind of maybe rural versus metro areas, general.
Yeah, we looked at some areas such as, well, in Ward 2, for instance, where we looked at the cost, and we start looking at the EPA benchmarks. The cost per customer is very high, and the user charge fees are very high, even on the operation and maintenance. So in those cases, we certainly wouldn't recommend that you go out for a loan program, and it may be too high of a cost project for those areas, period, even if you got 100% grant. But our recommendations would be that you seek funding for those type of areas where it does meet the EPA criteria for a high cost project. We're trying to obtain some sort of funding either through capital outlay or through some kind of grant program. Right now, there are not any grant programs other than CDBG, I think, has $1 million. We have a capital outlay submitted for this year, or is going in this year, for, I don't remember, Mark, was that Ward 1? Capital outlays that we just resubmitted this year. We resubmitted for Ward 1.
We had two capital outlay projects. One was for Ward 1 system treatment
Mm-hmm.
and some collection, or transport, I believe, not collection. And then we had a second one that was for South Ward 4 and South Ward 3 combined.
Right. And those are not the full projects, obviously, but they're starter type projects to get the ball rolling. You know, we're starting with some basics, portions of each one of those areas to try to start this program. The projects are, you know, obviously very, very high cost. The report also gets into the implementation phase as far as a schedule if you can receive funding. Our recommendation is that staff, administration, engineering staff have a chance to look at this, and the committee look at it as far as the cost, evaluate each particular study area, make a determination of whether you feel that it's feasible to go forward in that particular area. We may have to trim back somewhat on the project, and we can come back with a master executive summary, Mark, that you're talking about. We're still planning on doing that.
Yeah.
We'll tender that to you fairly shortly. But again, primarily most of that report will be summaries of our executive summaries of the 17 areas. At this point, I'll open up for questions, any particular questions that you have, maybe specific to particular areas.
Are there any questions for Mr. Harris at this time? Mr. Spell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Harris, I want to make sure I understand this information that you've brought to us today. Our staff can take this information and develop a parish-wide wastewater capital improvement plan based on this information, and also use this information for various applications of supplemental funding such as DEQ or, you know, state capital outlay, but you have formatted these documents to where we can plug it right into those applications?
They're formatted where you can pull one particular area if you want to, say an area is a low mod area or a minority area. It may be tailor-made towards certain types of programs where funding is available. So you could pull that particular report and make that submittal to whether it's rural utility services. Maybe they'll have a higher grant match for the project versus an area where the income level is higher. You can mix areas, and we can even go into these particular reports and trim back. I mean, some of them are still very large, but we can go back into, just like we did on the Ward 1 and portions of the Ward 3 and Ward 4, and go in and do some phased estimates. It's basically taking the estimates that we have in all these other study areas and just breaking it down a little further. But yes, and there will be a master executive which is going to wrap it all up as far as a table that totals everything up, gives some general discussion of every one of them. But on the whole, you want to, if you're going to be approaching funding agencies, you're going to want to take them separately or combine with one or two others.
Two more questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman. So basically, we have the information there that as a jury, we can go to staff and ask them to actually start cooking the spaghetti? Would that be an accurate assessment of the information that's contained within those reports? In other words, I would like us as a government body to start working on a plan that we're going to share with people in the parish and say this is going to be our approach to improving wastewater infrastructure in Calcasieu Parish. Do they have the data in those materials to start on that process?
Yes, I believe so. And I think it still needs to be flushed out as looking at these individual areas, looking at the project as a whole, and looking, do we trim back in certain areas or trim back on this project in a certain way to try to bring the funding amounts, the project amounts down to a more manageable level. But yes. And I think with our assistance and also with the master executive plan, that will help them out, and that's forthcoming very shortly.
Okay, last question. As far as you had mentioned the user fees, cost, and having them above the medians and high-cost project, if funding for this parish capital improvement plan is offset with other sources of revenue, that in turn offsets those costs to bring them down to where maybe they're considered more feasible?
Yes. In my report, the way I look at the debt service is I look at it for milestone. If you had to have 100%, say you went, I assume that you went to DEQ's program and borrowed the money from DEQ. Under their leveraged loan program, it's a 1% interest on their money, 20-year term. I think it's 22. They are considering a 30-year term. I don't know if that's been changed at this point or not, but I looked at it as a 20-year payout term. I looked at a 100% financing of the debt service on the loan through user fee collection, 80%, 60%, 40%, 20%. So that way, if you go in and you say you go talk to, when we can present them to rural utility services, they may say an area they can't match any grant money for it because of the income levels in that area. But in another area, they may say, okay, we can give you a 30% grant match or a 40% grant match. At that point, you can go in and look at the report and see how that adjusts the user fees.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Mr. Harris? Thank you, Wayne. Claude, sorry about that.
Will the master executive summary have population figures in them in your table?
Yes, we can do that.
Residences or something we can...
Yes, we can do that. We have it, we do have them in as far as the population projection report, but I'll take it in there. It's in the body of the report. We'll do a tabulation for you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Wayne. And now we'll ask Richard Meyer to come to the podium. Please, sir.
Chairman, members, staff, Richard Meyer, Meyer & Associates, 600 City Service Highway, Salford. Before I start, let me redistribute some of the reports I passed out to either absence or people that don't come to this meeting. I think I probably overdid that. Be a little bit more for, I can only put one back here. Just replace it, Brian. Staff has asked me to give you a brief review of what we've been looking at on wastewater ordinance enhancement, if you will. And what this document is what we call an advanced interim memorandum. We have targeted in here by end of December to submit to you preliminary report on what we're calling the wastewater ordinance enhancement. And the purpose of this document initially was to review your interim development ordinance against other ordinances along the what we call the I-10, I-12 corridor. We selected 12 parishes to kind of do that kind of review, namely Ascension Parish, East Baton Rouge, West Baton Rouge, Livingston, St. Tammany, Iberville, missing one in Lafayette. And if we go to tab 1, I'll just make this brief and cut to this kind of the summary. At the second page under tab 1 is a summary matrix that demonstrates, does a little comparative review or a general comparative review of what your interim development ordinance has with respect to wastewater treatment only against what some of the other parishes have. And what I would say, and I say it in the report, your interim development ordinance, I think actually is a pretty good ordinance, and is, compares favorably with, I don't want to necessarily call them the more stringent ones in the, of the 7, but I think some of the effective ones out of this 8, including Calcasieu, would be East Baton Rouge Parish, St. Tammany, and Calcasieu. The rest of them, some of them are very, very simple and straightforward, just require what DHH requires irrespective. And yours, if you look at the first line item on there, connection to public wastewater system required when accessible. Ascension Parish, if it's accessible, yeah, you must tie in. There's no exceptions to it. Calcasieu, you have in your interim development ordinance, you have 2 categories there. Your urban area, residential developments with more than 10 lots may connect or provide a community system or have lots at a size of 2 acres or more. That particular requirement works pretty much with some of the other more sophisticated ordinances in the other parishes. East Baton Rouge Parish on this line item, they have something, and I've used that in this report, comparable to what you have here in Calcasieu Parish. They have a major, before they became a city parish, there was a development of what they call a suburban wastewater transportation network, major network of trunk sewers and pressure mains. And if you're adjacent to the network, you must tie in. There's really not an exception to that. And even if you're not adjacent to it, the Department of Public Works under the East Baton Rouge Parish, City Parish government determines access feasibility. And the ordinance is somewhat vague on that, but I think reading between the lines, they sit down with the developer and work out a situation that is cost effective, I think, to all the parties. On Iberville Parish, simple, straightforward. If it's accessible, you tie in. Lafayette Parish, they've got it broken into a couple categories: city urban element and then the parish element. If you're within 1,500 feet of the parish city corporate limits, Lafayette city corporate limits, you basically have to tie in to a system, even if you have to enhance it. On the outside of that 1,500-foot limit, better known as the parish element, suburban subdivision as they call it, if it's reasonably accessible to an existing system, whether it's the city of Lafayette or sewer district over there, they have a combination of that, you must tie in. They determine the reasonableness. Livingston Parish, connection required. If trunk lines are inadequate, developer has to provide, I interpreted it, and they say it, provide additional treatment. I think they might be meaning additional transport capacity and/or treatment, but either way, you have to deal with it. St. Tammany Parish, connection required if accessible, no exceptions. West Baton Rouge Parish, they're just simply using the old code, state sanitary code, connection to public system required if within 300 feet, no exception. Calcasieu, therefore, on the, under your current interim development ordinance, you have, I think it compares nicely against East Baton Rouge, St. Tammany, Livingston, the variable being a little bit on the lot size in some cases. The other variable being that you're giving them an opportunity to not necessarily tie into the regional main, and I can understand that. Whereas, say, in East Baton Rouge Parish, because it's city parish, being mandatory is easy to enforce. Over here, South Lake Charles, you got a lot of regional trunks going through it, but it's not it's through your jurisdictional area, but you don't own it. And I assume that's the distinguishing difference in the way you've written your interim code, which is probably a good idea. And the 2 acres compares to St. Tammany, for example. All right, going down to community wastewater treatment facilities required that when there's not accessible public system. In Ascension Parish, they simply allow you to, whatever DHH will approve, whether it's a community plant, i.e. a subdivision facility, or an individual residential unit. In Calcasieu, of course you all know this, but I'll try to summarize it. The urban area, again, it's similar to what I read above, because you have the 3 options there. If you don't, obviously you're not tying in because it's not accessible under this category, but you can either provide a community system or have lots greater than 2 acres in size. And then in the community growth areas, centralized services if feasible, and within 1,200 feet of, and if not, I interpret that you would go along with DHH approved individual system. East Baton Rouge in this category, they get a little bit more stringent. Subdivisions of 50 lots or more must provide a DHH approved community wastewater treatment plant for that subdivision or development. And I don't say it there, but the Department of Public Works also has to approve the design and everything goes with it in addition to DHH. In Iberville, DHH approved systems, community system or individual. It's optional, not very tough. Lafayette Parish, Parish subdivision element. The way it's written there is that provide community treatment facility at DHH's discretion. They're kind of passing it off to DHH. If DHH can make a developer put a community system in because of the characteristics, that's how they've passed it on, so to speak. Or individual residential units as approved by DHH. Livingston Parish subdivisions with 31 or more lots must have an approved community sewage treatment system, no exceptions. That's a pretty tough one there. St. Tammany, provision of central wastewater treatment facility required, or when unit density is greater than 2 units per acre, no exceptions. Subdivisions in West Baton Rouge Parish with 20 lots or more shall be served by approved community wastewater treatment facility unless lots are 1 acre, comparable to some of yours in your interim development. Minimum lot size, item 3. In Ascension Parish, DHH approved individual resident units and DHH approved lot sizes. Calcasieu, I've interpreted this out of your minimum level of service out of your Appendix A out of the interim deal that it's less than 10 lots, DHH approved unit. East Baton Rouge, Subdivisions of 5 lots or more, 5 lots or less, with 22,500 square feet with 100-foot frontage may use DHH-approved individual residential units. Lots 60 to 50 lots with required 250-foot of frontage and 300-foot of depth, or about 1.7 acres, may use DHH-approved individual residential units. And then, as I already went over, if it's over 50 lots, it's a community system. Iberville Parish, they tie it all to DHH, the individual unit and the lot sizes. Lafayette Parish, basically the same thing. Out in the rural area, or the parish subdivision element, that's not accessible or is not feasible for assessment, they'll allow per DHH requirements. Livingston Parish, subdivisions with 20 lots or less may use DHH-approved individual residential units with lots with 100-foot frontage and 16,000 square foot minimum. Subdivisions with 21 to 30 lots, very similar. They increase the square footage up to 30,000 square foot and use DHH-approved individual unit. St. Tammany, DHH-approved units may be used in any subdivision where lots are greater than 1 acre per dwelling unit, similar to Calcasieu. And then West Baton Rouge, DHH-approved individual units may be used in subdivisions with less than 20 lots with a minimum lot size of 22,000 square foot and where lots are 1 acre or greater. That's a quick recap of how your interim, strictly with respect to wastewater treatment, measures up with some of the other parishes that I would say are comparable along the I-10, I-12 corridor. And I think on your ordinance, as you move forward to creating the final ordinance, as I understand it in reading the ordinance that you adopted last September, a couple months ago, that is effective until, for an additional year or until next September. And I suspect the objective is during this year period that you refine that interim development ordinance to become a final development ordinance. And with respect to wastewater, what we're saying here, and I won't bother you with the details of it, is if we get feedback from you all on what we presented here in the next few weeks, by the end of December, we come in and give you a final memorandum and how we could visualize moving forward strictly with respect to wastewater. The level of detail and some of the additional things comparing, I think you can narrow this down to probably 3 or 4 parishes for further refinement on finalizing, and that would be East Baton Rouge, St. Tammany, Livingston, and Calcasieu. Those are, I think, the ones that are obviously more advanced than the others, and we have a lot of ideas in the mind and also on some paper with respect to some level of details you do want to consider, I think, in the refinement of the final ordinance as it relates to wastewater. And we will have those in our final memorandum at the end of December. With that, I'll be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Meyer? Yes, sir. Mr. Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Meyer, when you say comparative, are we talking population? Is that, or land?
You know, population-wise, I didn't even look at population, to be honest with you. You look at the, even though it plays a part, but it's the issue of what's out there technically, what's out there environmentally, and that I think is driven more by a good subdivision in East Baton Rouge can be a good subdivision in Calcasieu Parish. If you want to look at that part of it, I think some of the demographics of income might play a part, but developers that are doing it to those requirements in Lafayette, St. Tammany, Livingston, are fully capable of doing that in Calcasieu. when you look at it from an environmental point of view. And I think from a housing market standpoint and value, that's a consideration that you're going to have to deal with. But at this time, I think from a technical standpoint and regulatory standpoint out there with DHH, DEQ, that's how I'd look at it, the first layer. And then if, as you progress your requirements, if some people think it's too stringent, then maybe population and income and things of that nature need to come into the formula. But at this point, it's more of engineering and geography and things of that nature rather than population.
Do you know of, in East Baton Rouge Parish and St. Tammany Parish, how long their ordinances have been in effect since they're comparable? We are only a year and a half.
I can have that in my final memorandum. I did not look at that, no.
And the last question, would any of this, when you're looking at this, are you considering any commercial needs and how that plays into this? Will that be in
the commercial needs are there, and the requirements track it with, in some cases, a little less stringent because, you know, if you have a packet sack out here and where there's not too many issues and there's not a lot of loading, depending upon the commercial facility, they are treated a little bit more generously than the resident.
All right.
Because the volume of waste generated is different. But that will track with this as it grows, without doubt. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Ms. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Myers, in reference to the lot size, they would all have to be the same lot size in that subdivision. All of the lots must be, for instance, under number 1, you had 2 acres. So that would be applicable and required for that subdivision, that
That's a minimum.
That would be the minimum for a new subdivision. Let's look back in reference to connection to public wastewater system required when accessible. Calcasieu under IDR. It says lot size of 2 acres or more. So
Yeah.
that would be for a new subdivision?
For a new subdivision is, yeah, that's the intent of that in my interpretation. Staff could probably speak to that more directly, wrote it, but it's, that is a minimum size. If you, under that, what you're referring to right there is, if I'm going out here and I'm gonna do a subdivision of 100 lots, and I'm adjacent to city's trunk sewer, your interim development ordinance, as I read it, would allow me to tie into the city if I could make a deal with them. If I can't make a deal with them, and I think this is why it's written properly, I can develop my own community treatment system in that subdivision and have a lot more lots and smaller than 2 acres, but I'm going to build me a treatment plant, and I'm going to have to operate and maintain it. So the lots varies a lot there. Now, the third option the parish has given a developer would be he doesn't want to build that community plant in that subdivision with his money and operate it. He can put 2 acre lots in that subdivision, and he's going to have less lots, but maybe more expensive. Who knows? That's the market analysis part of it. But you're giving a developer an opportunity to do 3 things, and I think in South Lake Charles for sure, because of the way the trunk networks are existing down there, you're allowing him first to tie into that. And I think if you get into the language, because you don't own that line, they have to reach some type of agreement with the city to have access to it. And I'm not going to speak for the city and what their requirements are, but let's assume as a developer, I can't work out a deal with it. I'm in parish domain, then the parish has allowed me to make another choice. I can either have more lots and build my own treatment plant to standards, or I can have less lots at larger, like 2 acres or more. And I can have individual residential units. So I think that's a pretty equitable treatment of development where that condition exists. And that, today, from what my knowledge of the existing system, that would exist in South Lake Charles, exist in South Sulphur, and it would exist in the areas between Sulphur and Westlake, because there are transport systems similar to the East Baton Rouge transport exist out there. And the way you structured this, you give a developer a menu that I think is pretty effective.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Griffin. Mr. Spell?
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Meyer, this information is very useful. I just have a comment. Ms. Wallace, in our further development of Vision Calcasieu, I think it'd be good if we were in position to share this with some of the developers that we're having dialogue with and let them look at it. I think it would probably go well and would demonstrate to them that we're not coming way out of left field with what we're trying to do. So if we could be in position to share this information during those discussions, I think that would be very valuable. So this information is very useful, and thank you.
You might want to wait for the final memorandum at the end of December if you're going to go out to developers with it. But you know, we might tweak that a little bit. But obviously, you do what you want with it.
Mr. Smart?
During our meetings with Vision Calcasieu, several of the developers in the jury expressed concerns about what other parishes did with the ownership of the systems and the lines and the maintenance of them. Did you get that from the other parishes, or?
Yeah, I have that information, and I referred to that in the page in front of that matrix. The issue of, if I use the example I was talking about a little bit a moment ago, and if I understood you right, if I'm the developer and I'm going to do my own community plan, how are you going to be ensured that that's going to be operated properly for the distant future? East Baton Rouge Parish, for example, probably I think has the toughest requirement that I've seen of the 7. You must be PSC licensed. That's minimum. And you cannot be a homeowners association, which has been historically problematic throughout the state. And it goes on and on and on. I just did not get into that detail in this first memorandum, but I do recognize that that's a concern, and it should be. And that one, that's an item that you're going to want to beef up. I think your interim deal with the other couple of parishes, East Baton Rouge, St. Tammany, cover that pretty well, particularly East Baton Rouge.
I think, reviewing our ordinance is a good thing, and Mr. Myers should certainly give us some expertise on some of the things we had. Like, for example, is it economically feasible for a developer to put a community system with just 10 lots, or should that be 20? Should it be 25? But so some recommendations like that on ours and some changes, and you'll notice that the individual systems are specified in there too, some of the requirements for those, when you have to use them, and things like that. And certainly getting our ordinance tweaked and modified by consultants will go a long ways to enhancing its final passage in the future, I would hope.
I think I think your interim ordinance, and I say it somewhere in this document, is pretty good ordinance, and some tweaking I think is the right word.
Finished?
Yes.
Ms. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reference to, I want to address Mr. Smart, sir. Thank you. Claude, in reference to your statement about the 10 lots or more, that was a concern of mine also. Whether a subdivision with only 10 lots, I had some concerns about that. But as a whole, I think we do have a good ordinance that we're trying to adopt. I really do. So thank you anyway. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Richard. Mr. Smart, Chair will address you. Thank you.
I'm going to speak in reference to Dr. Phillips and the McNeese study, and we're requesting that the agreement with McNeese to study the individual systems be terminated. I've requested that of McNeese, and the reasons are basically the more we got into it, we found out that the research is out there. Wasn't much use in doing a lot of it again. They have this universities and total independence doing all of this kind of stuff, and it's being used everywhere, and really didn't make a lot of sense to spend a lot of time and effort to go and doing it again. But you know, like zero discharge systems, they're possible here if we wanted to use them. If the police jury wanted to go to them, it wouldn't be possible. We found out to do them on existing systems because the lot sizes and a lot of the areas are just too small to add sprinklers or mound systems, especially where you have a water well and you can't separate them enough. And it's just not enough room to keep the effluent from a spray system from getting on your neighbor or your house and other stuff in you know, a lot of these yards. But McNeese hasn't been able to do a lot of the extensive effluent testing that we requested to this point. I requested that they just stop for the time being, and you know, we can either do it in-house if the police jury wants those results, or we can get a new agreement with McNeese in the future. You know, if the police jury chooses to. I've requested that McNeese do a paper and turn it in, the results of their study, so we can try to, you know, have an official document, and Dr. Phillips has agreed to do that. You know, research indicates, like I said, that you know, we can, if the police jury wants to go the route of zero discharge, we can require that, you know, that take place. You have to, you know, there's certain drawbacks now. It's not a anything. It's some odor complaints for one. You have to have larger lot sizes, and north part of the parish can probably put in some type of trench system where you have sandy soils and stuff. They wouldn't have to go with spray irrigation. But you know, in the long run, I think when we can draw up a paper with the conclusions and get it to the jury and with some recommendations, and you know, but we probably need a little guidance from the jury, this committee, something about where you want to go. Is you know, do you want something drawn up as zero discharge for the future, or do you want something drawn up, try to get a cost or something on installing chlorinator units on all the existing systems, which is about your only consistent alternative. Larger lots like I have at my house, I could put a sprinkler system on it because I have 5 acres, but you know, most people don't have that, and it would be difficult to require them to, possible in fact, to require existing stuff to existing systems to go zero discharge. But I recommend that we follow Richard Myers' recommendation to redo the ordinance, and we try to draft in these individual system requirements and lot sizes, et cetera, and in there. But again, we need some guidance from the jury about where you want to go with this.
Mr. Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm okay with making a motion to terminate. I do have a couple of concerns. First concern is as far as the existing mechanical systems in the parish, I'm convinced that our public works operations spend the majority of their time cleaning sewer out of the ditches versus truly 100% of the time addressing legitimate drainage complaints. And I'm not saying that we're doing the wrong thing. I'm saying that all this water that is going into the ditch system is making our job tougher from a day-to-day maintenance standpoint. So the point I'm getting after is I would like to see staff give us some recommendations on when we get an inspection program moving forward, that as these systems age and come to where they're not working properly, that we have something to upgrade to start diminishing the problem of effluent going into the road right-of-way ditch system. So I would like staff to provide those recommendations. Whether or not the study from McNeese is necessary to do that, I'm hearing it's not necessary, so I'm willing to make a motion to terminate. But I would like to see some recommendations from staff on some system upgrades, and have them report those recommendations back to us at a later date.
You want to say something before we ask for a second, or let me ask for a second first? We have a motion on the floor.
Can I ask a question for a second?
You may.
Mr. Smart, how much money did we start with this contract with McNeese? How much was the total ballpark?
33,800, I think. I'm not positive. It's 30-something thousand.
How much have we paid him to date?
2/3 of it.
In your professional opinion, have we got 2/3 of our money out of this?
Why you won't put me on the spot?
Okay, you don't have to answer that.
More out of it than we got from the Corps?
Yes, sir.
Do you think the summary we're gonna get from McNeese is gonna be worth $24,000?
I think the total effort we put in, some of it might have been my increase in knowledge, but, you know, it's gonna be worth it, but, that's a hard question to answer, but, I think the total process is gonna be worth it for the jury.
All right, well, I'll give it a second, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion and a second on the floor to terminate the contract with Dr. Frank Phillips. Before I call for a vote, I think one of the reasons why Dr. Phillips was hired, McNeese was hired, was to kind of more or less reassure that what we thought actually was out there. Whether or not we got our money's worth, I don't know. A lot of times we purchase items that we pay X amount of dollars for. Did we get our money's worth? I don't know that either. But the fact is that we did agree to hire him, and he did what we asked him to do. And with that being said, are there any other comments referring to the termination of Dr. Phillips' contract?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
in reference to the contract with Dr. Phillips, I'm really disappointed. I don't know if I'm disappointed because now we're saying that we really didn't need it, or is it because now we're saying that we have questions whether or not they really did what they were supposed to. And that's unfortunate because I have a lot of respect for McNeese and for Dr. Phillips. And I think maybe we need to be more careful before we go out and get all these studies and then think we don't need them.
Your statement is well noted. Any other comments? If not, we'll ask for a vote. All in favor? Anybody opposed? Motion to terminate the contract with Dr. Phillips carries. Anything else, Claude?
No, sir, I went over it kind of quick. Sometimes I don't say everything I mean to. There's at least something else you want to know, ask me, please. I'll try to answer.
Mr. Bell.
Mr. Smart, the contract with Dr. Phillips, I mean, was that something that was kind of mutual, or we're just terminating the contract? Has that been discussed with Dr. Phillips?
It has been discussed with Dr. Phillips, and he's agreed to it.
Okay. Any other comments? Claude, you have anything else to add?
No, sir.
That's your report. Okay. All right. At this time, Mr. Beam.
The next item is dealing with what we call individual system inspections. I suppose the larger issue, this particular item, excuse me, y'all had requested information, which Barbara Monroe on our staff has been in contact with the Calcasieu folks to fill you in. So this is a piece of that larger inspection issue. I'll give you the quick overview, and if you want to ask details of what you found, she'll certainly be able to come up. But basically, the issue is whether DHH up in that area did any more than they do here as far as inspections. And the short answer is not really. They are pretty much complaint-driven, try to handle it as best they can up there. I think because of the way we actually have it here in Calcasieu with your ordinances, we actually already have a complaint-driven system here. That they don't really have that up there at the parish level. It's a little different in that the ordinance or ordinances in Calcasieu do get into some lot sizes and things like that, but the parish themselves do not get into the inspection business, if you will. And the DHH level of that is, as best we can tell, is probably comparable to what it is here. So there's no big revelation in that sense that we may not be getting something from the state agency down here that they have up there. And I think that was kind of at the core of the whole research. On that note, and again, if you want a little more detail on that, Barbara can certainly provide it. Just to kind of point out something, I think Claude hit on it. We're all going to need some direction as we go forward on this whole inspection issue. We've heard differences of opinion on, do you do an inspection program? I think that's a very big and complex issue, and one we will come back to you with some information on, but we want to lay out some options for you to consider, because it's not as cut and dried as it may seem. Back in August, the planning staff presented to you what it would cost. This was at your request. What would it cost if we did an inspection system in-house? And Wes and the planning staff presented that to you. That's full-fledged, parish-provided, covering all the systems. But of course, that's a big leap, and it's a big cost. There's a lot of implications with that. There may be other ways of doing it, and we feel like we owe it to you to try to study those and lay that out. You could possibly, if you chose to go that route, have some sort of private inspection that you would oversee. So there's different ways. One thing we want to just make sure we try to focus on and convey to you is that the more we put into the efforts that Meyer Group has brought forth today, and any community system that would go as part of an ordinance, any systems in the future that may work that are better than ours now as far as individual, all those add up to that stop the bleeding that Mark has referred to. And over time, that starts to pay off, so that the inspection of the existing systems becomes less and less. It's still a problem. We acknowledge that, and I think y'all have passed your motion that you want to hear some options on it. Just kind of want to point that out. We will come back to you over time on how you could do the options, but that whole inspection issue is one that we need to put some more time in before we have recommendations to you. But for tonight's purposes, if you want any more info on the Caddo Bossier, I know Barbara can certainly cover that with you.
Mr. Spell?
Mr. Beam, how much time?
On what?
Going over those options and bringing those recommendations back to the committee and the jury.
I hesitate to give you a final on that. Probably depends on what we find when we study it. What our plan is come back to you in February with how we've progressed on it. It's possible by then we would have some preliminary options you could lay out for an inspection program with associated cost. That whole cost side is maybe as much of the challenge as anything else. You know, how do you pay for that? We don't have a revenue source for that right now. Do you do some sort of a fee structure? If so, would it be partial or wholly paid for by residents, and how? Or would it be through another source? So it's those sorts of questions we need to answer. So I would say by February we'd be able to give you some preliminary information. I don't know that we would have final options recommended that quickly, but we would have pretty good progress by then.
I guess if I could summarize, Mr. Chairman, it's no secret that I'd like to be putting pipe in the ground and building wastewater plants, but even if we do get to that point in the near future, which is my personal hope, I believe an inspection program is still warranted, because I think it's completely unrealistic to expect that we will connect the entire parish to a public system. I do believe an inspection program is necessary and warranted. I would hope that we can have something up and running sooner than later. I know that I have been getting comments on doing more with less as a government entity. I would be interested in finding out what the cost associated with privatizing that inspection program and what those annual costs are in comparison to an in-house program. My only concern is that we're delaying. I'm okay with receiving a report in February, but I would like us to eventually get to some point of closure to to where we as a body can make a final decision on an inspection program. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Brian, in relative to what Shannon just got through saying, why don't we put something on the agenda for the February meeting to discuss options? Do we do it ourselves, privatization? Do we have come up with some other option where the citizens themselves would be involved and that sort of thing? It's going to be hard, I think, unless we do those kind of things, to find out whether it's feasible for us to do them. Cheaper for privatization or cheaper for individuals with some kind of checks and balances that they do what we ask them to do, that sort of thing. We're going to have to get the public involved. I don't think there's any way we can do all of this without them being on board. And that being said, Mr. Hassan, did you want the floor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I apologize if I was not remembering this right. When Wes did his presentation, it was my understanding that we did ask staff to include that in the budget for next year, the inspectors. Am I the only one that remembered that?
Who wants to answer the question?
Well, if that's true, we missed it because we didn't put that in the budget because we didn't, that was not, it was not, certainly not my impression that y'all instructed us to put an inspection program in the budget that you had not fully approved a revenue stream for, Ellis. I mean, I don't, there's not a revenue stream for that yet. Now, we have those, we have the expenditure side of that prepared if y'all would choose to go that route of in-house inspectors. That could be easily supplemented into the budget, but there's several questions that need to be dealt with before that time. That's
such as inspection fees and.
Well, yeah, the revenue stream about how to pay for that. Number one, number two, when does that start? I mean, obviously, you can't. We could put it in the budget tonight for January 1st, and we wouldn't have a program on January 1st because we couldn't put it in place that quickly to hire the people and all that kind of stuff. I think the point that we're trying to get across here is that the idea of an in-house inspection program isn't the only way to approach that, and maybe is the best way, but maybe not. And so we want to be sure y'all have in front of you on the table a set of options about how, if you want to have inspections of those systems, what's the best way to do that? And whether it be to have private contractors do it, whether it be to have a private businesses do that themselves. Excuse me. I don't know which one's the best, but y'all need to have an option to figure out. You need to have some options in front of you, I think, because there's other ways to do it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, do you think we would be out of order by not having a discussion of that, Mark, in February?
Well, I think that's our goal, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is to have something in front of y'all to look at some of those options. Hopefully, we can produce those kind of things in that period of time.
No, sir, I was just concurring with him.
No,
We did discuss it, but we didn't put it in the budget.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, Mr. Scott.
Mr. Beam, just a couple statements. When we talk about, I mean, right now you can have Hoot or you can have a number of these companies come out and inspect your system. When you say private inspection, what are we going to force people to get private? I mean, what do you mean by, how are we going to make people get an inspection by a private entity? Not.
Well, that's part of the
That's part of the study.
Okay. Well, we want to be sensitive to the idea that I think there's Mark said this. There's always more. There's usually more than one way to handle a particular situation. This is uncharted territory. This is something you're not statutorily required to do. You're deciding to whether you take it on because of the environmental and health type reasons. For example, and this has just been for discussions, you want to get sort of, use your imagination on some of these. You think about your inspection system for your car, and it's not done by the state. It's done by all of the different places that the state allows to do it for a fee, and they have that structure. Now, this is different, granted. But the idea is there's ways that maybe you don't have a full-fledged government run inspection program that you have to pay for annually. And it depends on the level of inspection you want to do. That's another thing. And I think we owe it to you to give you options that have that, because it will result, if informal, if the evidence that's come back in informal tests, and Claude can allude to it more, if there's a lot of systems broken, a lot of systems are going to have to be fixed. A lot of systems will have to be paid for. And that's going to make a lot of people mad. So you want to be thinking about how far you go, and we really think we owe it to you to give you some options. But I can't answer as far as how that private option would look. We really need to do a little more research on that.
Well, I think with making a lot of people mad, you're going to make a lot of people happy. You know, this isn't a big issue, so, you know, we are here to represent our people. But as a gentleman told me the other night, he was like, but you're also here to lead. And leading's not always the easy thing to do. Representation, we can all do that. But can you lead while you represent? So, I took that to heart. And so, you know, it's a tough question. The next thing we talked about was when we buy and sell houses. So maybe that's a thought when you're going through this process. And the last thing is, when we're pulling permits already for rebuilding houses or add-ons, maybe look at a certain level of money that's being put into a home that we automatically look into that system. You know, if they're coming in to apply for a permit, just a way to start catching some of these on the side. So I'm not really, you know, it's just a couple thoughts. And my last question would be for maybe Miss Monroe. It's kind of a simple question, but with Caddo, what led Caddo Parish to say, okay, we're going to zero discharge? I mean, I know we have a problem. We'd love to say zero discharge, let's do it, but what actually, if you can answer that question, got Caddo Parish to say, okay, zero discharge?
First of all, I'm Barbara Monroe, and I'm from 209, or I live at 209 Helen Street in Lake Charles. Answer that question, from what I understood back about 10 years or so ago, well, whenever the DHH, the Health Department, decided to allow or require the discharge to the front road ditches, Caddo Parish in that area did not want that to be happening in their area. So when that did take place, they went ahead and wrote an ordinance and said, no, we want zero discharge. We don't want any discharges from our lot discharge from the sanitary sewer treatment process. So they wrote the ordinance accordingly, and then at this point, as Brian mentioned, that the DHH still has oversight as far as the compliance, and requiring them inspections and so on and so forth. So the ordinance was written, and that was the reasoning. They just didn't want it happening. They can be more stringent than the DHH requirements would be, but that was their decision.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any, excuse me, are there any other questions? Mr. Smart.
I want to add to her answer a little bit. You know, Caddo and Bossier, they get a large portion of their drinking water out of Caddo Lake. And they didn't want all the effluent running into it because people had to drink it, so they had a little more incentive. But also it's a big recreational area, and people get out and swim and do a lot of other things similar to here. And they wanted to stop the effluent from getting in those areas.
Thank you, Mr. Smart.
Okay, that being said, are there any other jurors in the audience that would like to make a comment, ask a question at this time? Step right up. I know you don't live at 122 Vine, but you can say that if you want to.
I'm renting a room from Charlie. People like to swim here too. They just can't because most of the summer there's a warning out there telling you that you can't from the bacteria in the water here and in Cameron. Well, guess where that's coming from? It's coming out of those ditches. Starts in Moss Bluff and heads south.
Actually, it starts in Oakdale, I believe.
Oakdale, maybe, yeah, we're probably getting it from Oakdale. It just seems like we're not moving forward very fast. And I can tell you, we've got all the information. Right now, within 30 days, they can tell you this is how much that inspection program is going to cost. And whether it's privatized or we do it, they're going to have to pay for it. If it's a private company doing it, they're not going to go out there for free. I mean, the people are going to have to pay for it. If we do it ourselves, there's been talk, maybe we can begin off by supplementing it with gaming funds. I mean, something needs to get started. We need to start inspecting the systems. They're not going to go away. They're going to continue to break. And yeah, if it was as easy as, I guess if we could put wheels on it and drive it down the road, we could do like a vehicle inspection, and then the state police would catch it being out of date. But I don't think that's going to work on a sewage system. I don't know. I'm ready to do something. We've been talking about this for, way before I got here. I know that. It's been 20 years. And the problem's still the same. The poop's still in the ditch. And the beaches are still being closed every summer. I mean, what's more important than the environment? And if somebody has to pay $25 a year for that, hey, I guess I'll apologize to them, but I mean, that's just part of it. Do they want to continue to damage the environment and have all that stuff go in the ditch? I mean, to me, $25, tie into the city or live in the city. I mean, it's just kind of one of the privileges. They want to live out of town and out in the country. It costs you $25 or whatever that magic number is. But I mean, I don't know how we can just continue to dump all that stuff in the river and into the Gulf and it'd be okay. Then next year we just talk about it some more and nothing happens. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Shannon?
Mr. Chairman, although I do agree with my colleague, Mr. Landry, I guess whether it's privatized or we do it in-house, staff did give us information. It was $400,000 to $500,000 annually on the cost of an in-house program. I do think we could start that up relatively soon. I do think there'd be a little time required to get it up and running. If we do that with gaming funds, I mean, that's a viable option. I guess the only concern I have is that I would like to be able to do something in the '02 year, and I guess, I mean, are we in a position to allocate some money for the '10 cycle, so whether it's private or in-house, at least it's there waiting, and we're not kind of trying to look in a nook and cranny to find it? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, you've got gaming funds if you wanted to put that on funding this program, but that's an operational expense, and I think y'all have shied away from doing that. I think that's a good policy to shy away from doing that. I mean, you got money that you could appropriate for that. I'm not sure it's the best source for what is an operational program. I think you really want to look at a ready and stable revenue stream to do this. And you know, with all due respect to Chris, $25 I don't think is going to cut it. And with the amount of money that we'd need to raise to make this thing work, number one. And number two, I would have to say I think we need to be really, really careful about making this sound like it's a lot simpler than what it really is. It is complex, and you know, the idea that we just need to get this show on the road, I mean, I think you're trying to do that with the studies that you've commissioned, and I don't think haste will be in anyone's favor here. I think you really need to look at the different options that are there before you leap off that diving board into this deal. I think we need to be very careful. Dennis brought up some good points a while ago about how we would enforce this. I mean, whether we're enforcing it or whether we're doing it with a private contractor, we got a list of homeowners. We know, I mean, you know, we would start with a list of homeowners if we're doing it in-house, and we try to do a third of those every year for over a 3-year period. Well, that same list is available if we got a private contractor doing it, and we'd want to make sure that those people on that list for that year we're having turned in inspections by a private contractor. So I think there's ways that we can do that. We can utilize the sale of a home. major remodeling of a home to really give us a kickstart on doing that. But please, let's not make this sound easier and simpler than what it really is. It is one of the reasons we've been talking about it for as long as we have is because there isn't an easy answer. If there was, we'd already done it. But to answer your question, you know, you've got some reserves that could be a source of funds to kickstart a program, but you don't want to kickstart it without knowing what the successor to that kickstart's going to be. You need to have that in place. And I don't think you've broached that yet.
I guess my only concern, Mr. Chairman, is I've been told very clearly in the last few weeks, stop government from growing. And we create a completely new inspection department, hire 10 people, buy 20 vehicles. We're growing government, and that would be with an in-house program. And so, as Mr. Scott and Mr. Landry's urgency, those need to be considered, and we do need to lead, but I'm a little concerned. You know, are we adding to government? And how much are we going to add? Is adding this much justify a solution to the problem? Those are the things that I'm weighing on my mind. I share Mr. Landry's urgency, but I also have a constituency that has told me recently, stop growing government. I have to balance those two requests, and actually I'm still deliberating that. If the committee and the jury would like to appropriate a startup fund that lasts for a period of 1 year, I would have no objections to that. I believe, and maybe this is a question for Mr. Smart, or maybe Mr. Vickers, I'm not sure which one, but an inspection program, a parish-wide capital improvement plan, do we have the resources, staff, for someone to spearhead that, organize it, put it together, coordinate it, management? Do we have those resources? Are we talking about having a supervisor for wastewater infrastructure and inspections? I would pose that
I don't want to
question.
be rude, but we're going to leave it there. It's 5:20, and that being said, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, may I have a minute personal privilege? I just have one statement, and then you could.
Okay.
In reference to, and I agree with you, I've been listening to you very carefully during these meetings, and I agree with a lot of things that you're saying. My concern is that a lot of our citizens are complaining about big government, but a lot of them don't want to pay for the necessary services that they need. And so what happens? It falls back on government. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
A motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned.
November 24th. Roll call, please.
Mr. Enterpont?
Here.
Mr. Brame is not able to attend this evening. Mr. Collins is not either, deaf in his family. Mrs. Griffin?
Present.
Mr. Guidry?
Here.
Mr. Hassan?
Here.
Mr. Landry?
Here.
Dr. Mackey is out of town this evening. President McMillan?
Here.
Mr. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Spell?
Here.
Mr. Stelly? Mr. Sias?
Present.
Mrs. Trimmie?
Here.
And Chairman Farmer.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Item number 3 is a presentation of parish government primer video. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Farnham. Part of our efforts related to the government channel and the website are very strong toward educating citizens about local government, what you do, what you pass here, what policies. But frankly, a lot of people don't necessarily have a concept of some of the basic idea of how parish government works and what it is, etc. The government channel has produced a parish government primer video, what we call it. This is something that actually the school libraries have now. We also have it on our website. It's not something we do often, but we felt like, and I'm going to brag on a little bit here, they did a fantastic job with this, and we feel like you'll be very proud of it. Mr. McMillan saw it. He and I went to an event recently where some leadership folks from Southeast Texas were here, and they were very impressed with it, and they wanted to know more about it, and so felt like it was worth showing the whole police jury. It's about 10 minutes long, and it's just to keep you up on what we have going in that realm with educating our citizens.
Mr. McMillan.
Thank you. I'd like to just kind of reiterate what Mr. Beam is saying. We had a bunch of folks from Southeast Texas, and you know, as police jurors, one of the things we always have to tell them is the difference, you know, county commissioners and police jurors, parish, and their counties. This video you're going to see today absolutely thrills me. It explains it. It's humorous. It's got a lot of wit to it, and the young lady that did it, Jessica Conrad, did a great job. Y'all see her, and just really explains a lot of history about the Louisiana and the whole thing. These folks from Southeast Texas, after that video, were really thrilled to kind of be able to know exactly what this was about. So I'm just, one of the things I spoke to Brian about, I said, we need to bring this to committee night. We need to show this to the jury, so I hope you enjoy this. Thank you.
Okay, Tom?
Hello, I'm Jessica, and I work here at the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury. Now, I'm sure some of you may not know too much about us, but that's okay. Today, I'm going to tell you all about the police jury and its role in our government for Calcasieu Parish.
First, what in the world is a police jury? What is a parish? You know, here in Louisiana, we tend to always want to be different from everyone else in the country. All other states have counties instead of parishes, and they are run by county governments, not police juries. Louisiana didn't put this into place for fun or just to be unique. Our state actually has a very interesting history to it that goes back nearly 300 years, and it all started with the country of France. Louisiana is the only state in the Union with its heritage stemming from France, and because of this, we are unique to the nation. See this guy? This is Napoleon Bonaparte. He invented the Napoleonic Code, which are a group of laws and procedures used to govern France. Since the code was put into effect at the same time the French ruled Louisiana, our state adopted the new rules as well. Napoleon once said, "My true glory is not to have won 40 battles, but what will live forever is my civil code." Napoleon was right. Today, the Napoleonic Code is the official order of rules and laws in France, and it influences our laws right here in Louisiana. Among these rules is that we have parishes governed for the most part by police juries, rather than counties governed by county commissions or county boards like in other states. The police jury form of government was established by the state legislature in 1807. So, what is a police jury? A police jury is the official government body that administers the operations of the parish. You have city governments, like those in Lake Charles or Vinton, that handle certain functions inside those city limits. But you also need to have a government body that takes care of some parish-wide needs, such as the court and jail system, as well as services for people who live outside municipal boundaries.
That's where we come in. We'll talk more about the role of the police jury later, but first, let's take a look at how this area became Calcasieu Parish. Do you know about the legend of the notorious pirate Jean Lafitte? He supposedly buried treasure somewhere close by these waters. We may never know if there really is treasure out there. We have a pretty good idea of why Lafitte liked to stay in this area.
For a period of time, a section of present-day Calcasieu Parish bordering Texas was known as No Man's Land. That's because there was no form of law or government there. This attracted a great deal of people who were outlaws, criminals, and pirates like Lafitte. You're probably familiar with the Louisiana Purchase that was enacted in 1803. Well, this area wasn't even included. It was still considered no man's land. It wasn't until the year 1819 when the U.S. government took control of the area. At that point, our area was sparsely populated, and southwest Louisiana was part of St. Landry Parish. For the next 21 years, this remained the same until a group of individuals decided to form their own parish. I'm standing here in what used to be called Marion. You may be familiar with this area when you drive down Interstate 10 and see the Cameron Clo exit. All you see around me is pretty much all that's left here now. Near this location is where 6 men from various parts of southwest Louisiana decided to break away from St. Landry and form Calcasieu Parish. That date was Monday, August 24th, 1840. This was Calcasieu Parish in 1840. Looks different, doesn't it? That's because after Calcasieu Parish was formed, 4 other parishes spawned out of it. They were Cameron, Allen, Beauregard, and Jefferson Davis. The 5-parish area is still commonly referred to today as Imperial Calcasieu. Today, 41 of the 64 parishes in Louisiana use the police jury form of government. When Louisiana was first organized as a territory, parish government was responsible for law and order, as well as for general administration, hence the name police jury. Until the 1970s, jurors were elected by wards, but today, they are elected to single-member districts of roughly equal population. The state allows parishes some instruction as to how many can serve on a police jury, and in Calcasieu we have 15. Each one represents a different area of our parish, and they're elected to 4-year terms. At their first meeting each year, a president and other officers are elected by the police jury. The president is in charge of running the police jury meetings, appointing committees, and signing official documents like emergency declarations. The president also represents the parish at official events, cuts a lot of ribbons, and makes a lot of speeches. In Calcasieu, the police jury has 2 official meetings each month here at the parish government building in Lake Charles. They also have a regularly scheduled committee meeting each month where they discuss specific parish operations like public works and the budget. And if they need to, they can also call for a special meeting. Our police jury is like most government bodies in that it uses something called Robert's Rules of Order to operate its meetings. Robert's Rules is a list of procedures that help formal meetings move efficiently and effectively. The police jury creates an agenda during a committee meeting, and then they base their meetings on that agenda. Citizens like you and me can speak at any police jury meeting, provided the topic is on the agenda for that meeting. All police jury meetings are open to the public. It's a law. The law states that the police jury has to announce and publish their meeting times and dates. They have to keep detailed minutes of action taken during the meetings, and they have to allow access to the records. So, what does the police jury do at these meetings? Well, lots of things. Most importantly, they pass the laws that govern Calcasieu Parish. Laws at the parish level are called ordinances. An ordinance passed by the police jury can be something very simple, like setting the speed limit on a parish road, or something very complicated, like establishing how future buildings should be constructed for the safety of the public. We call those building codes and regulations. All of the local laws of the parish are kept in a book called the Calcasieu Parish Code of Ordinances. It's 26 chapters long, and it's written by lawyers, so you won't find it on any bestseller list. But you can see it on our website if you want to look up any parish law. The police jury also creates policies that direct the operation of all parish government services. We are involved with services ranging from public works that builds and maintains roads to emergency management, for potential disasters like hurricanes, to mosquito control and animal services. There are a vast number of different services under the control of the police jury. You can get a complete list at our website. In total, the police jury has nearly 20 different departments and over 500 employees. The police jury is also in charge of creating and working with many other government bodies. The police jury appoints members of fire protection districts, airport boards, drainage districts, and even parks and recreation districts. The police jury has to follow many laws from the state and federal governments, so they work together on many projects.
Sometimes agreements with other local municipalities or neighboring parishes are created to share the responsibility for services. Here's another interesting fact I bet you didn't know. The police jury, in addition to its own services, is required by state law to provide office space for many other operations that help to keep our parish running smoothly. While the sheriff runs the jail, the actual building itself belongs to the police jury. It's the same arrangement for the court system, the district attorney's office, the clerk of courts, coroner, and many other services outside the direct control of the police jury.
How much does this all cost? And where does the money come from? Well, the police jury's annual budget for 2009 totals more than $207 million.
The money comes primarily from taxes paid by citizens, businesses, and industries in Calcasieu Parish. The police jury also receives money from gaming revenues in our area and from state and federal governments for specific projects and services.
That's a brief explanation of the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, from how we got started to what we do today. We hope you've enjoyed it. For more information, our website is always available. If you have any questions, you can drop us a line with email, Facebook, or Twitter. Thanks.
Why didn't you tell me for Brandon and Connor to come sit in here?
They just made it. I just want to say, you did an excellent job. I think all the jurors here that had the chance to see this, and you could use it in civic clubs. We could use it. The possibilities of educating kids about what the police jury is. I just think it's a fantastic video. It is on our website, and I think it's something that our staff and Tom and them did very well, and very proud of them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I agree. It's also a very, very good video. It answers a whole host of questions that I was crossed with on the campaign trail, that some of which are fairly difficult to explain to people. So it's a great job. I appreciate it. Any other comments, Mr. Spell?
How are we going about distributing this? Or are we distributing it, or are we providing it to civics classes, social studies?
Right now, Mr. Spell, it's at all the school libraries, and Tom is working with the school system to see about the possibilities of integrating it into the civics curriculum. It's a little bit more of a challenge because they have a lot of competing things, but we did create this with that in mind, that would be very easy to slide into their curriculum for local government, which, you know, it's obviously just as important as state and federal. So we feel like it's a good fit, but there's no formal arrangement yet, but Tom is working with the school system toward that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Guidry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Brian, I do want to commend you and the young lady for what you guys did. It was very educational. I think a lot of that can be used in a lot of the local high schools to educate the younger kids on what we do up here as a governing body. But I just had one question. I noticed on some of the cartoon characters that they had, why did Mr. McMillan have to be the good guy, and myself, Chris Landry, and I think it was Mr. Andrew Point, why we were the bad guys? Was that something? I'm just picking, Brian.
Well, I was going to say, Hal actually wanted, he mandated that he be consulted
I can tell
prior
it must
to
have
the
been
final,
edited before it was actually shown and everything. But great job again, Brian.
Yeah, thank the government channel staff. They did a wonderful job.
Mr. Andrew Pond.
Let me just make one comment. It's amazing that we would look at this video tonight in light of the fact that not too long ago, the pastor of Our Lady of Prompt Succor Catholic Church asked me, what is a police jury? Well, I'm going to tell you what, when I see him, I'm going to say, turn on your television or go to the network, and you'll know exactly what the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury, because you can't really give a definitive explanation of what the Calcasieu Parish Police Jury or any police jury is. But anyway, that sums it up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments? We'll move on to item 4. Consideration of making a recommendation with reference to adopting a resolution authorizing the president of the police jury to execute the necessary documentation for acquisition of right-of-way from Larry John Anslett, Darrell and Mary Caldwell, and Billy J. Schufens on Edgerly Road in Ward 4. Shifens.
Need a motion?
Need a motion.
Move.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
No discussion.
Any opposition? Hearing none, motion carries.
I was just so aggravated that I didn't bring Brandon and Connor in to sit here and watch this. I learned a lot. I know we're on another thing, but I'd like to have a copy of that. Thanks. I don't have anything to say on this particular matter.
Thank you.
I'm in order, Mr. Chairman. We'll move to adjourn.
Second.
Move to adjourn. We're adjourned.
Tuesday, November 24, 2009 will come to order. The purpose of today's committee meeting is to formulate an agenda for the regular meeting for the police jury for December 3rd, 2009. Entertain a motion to pull items 22 through 24.
Second.
Item 22, take appropriate action on the expiration of the term of Mr. Charles Temple, a member of the Board of Directors of Southwest Louisiana Convention and Bureau, Visitors Bureau. Correspondence has been received from the Chamber of Southwest recommended that Mr. Temple be
So
reappointed.
moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Trimmy and seconded by Ms. Landry. Discussion? Ms. Griffin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question. I think I need to be reminded the makeup of this board. How many members we have on the board? Who could answer me? Mark?
We have two.
Two representatives from the police jury.
Yes, ma'am.
And may I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Trimmy, what is the total number of members on that board?
Well, you caught me off.
Okay,
I'm
that's
not real
okay.
sure.
That's okay.
But when the new legislation was set up several years ago, the City of Lake Charles, this is the Chamber Southwest, which is the City of Lake Charles, pretty well appoints that member. And then the next one is the Association of Commerce from West Calcasieu has an appointment. And then it's like from the those people that are on boards like for Mardi Gras deals and museums
Businesses.
and stuff like that, yeah.
And the minorities, Sandy, don't they have, didn't the state with that new appointment, they still have representatives?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. It's been so long since I visited this.
After the
I
first of
wanted
the
to-
year, me and you'll go to a meeting and catch up.
That
I
would
need
be
to
good.
catch up
Okay.
myself.
All right, thank you,
Okay.
sir.
Any other discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item 23, take appropriate action on the expiration of the term of Mr. Mike Carrier, member of the Board of Directors of Southwest Louisiana
So
Convention
moved.
Bureau.
Second.
Been moved by Mr. Trimmy and seconded by Mr. Hassan. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries.
I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Does this board carry term limits?
Yes.
I thought it did, but I
It's
didn't.
2 3-year terms.
Two?
That's, the new law is 2 3-year terms.
2 3-year terms?
Yes. 2 terms.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I learned something.
Item 24, take appropriate action to appoint a representative to the Lake Charles North Redevelopment Authority, which was created by virtue of Act Number 529 of 2009 regular session of Louisiana legislation. State representative to be appointed by the police jury representing the areas included within the authority's jurisdiction, namely police jury districts 2, 3, and 4.
Mr. Chairman, Districts 2, 3, and 4 has agreed to recommend that Mr. Alan Jenkins be appointed to the North Redevelopment Authority.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second. Are there any discussions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion carries. At this point now, we would like to recognize Mr. McMurray.
Thank you, Ms. Silas. We just need to add a insurance committee report. We need to have an insurance committee meeting next Thursday. Y'all be getting a notice about that for 4:45. Jerry's got an insurance renewal that needs to take action on by the committee, and so we need to add a report on this agenda.
Can we suspend the rules and do that, or we just add it?
Just add it
Okay,
now.
I'll
Just
make
add
the
it.
motion that we just
Second.
add it to the agenda.
Okay. Been properly moved by Ms. Trimmy and second by Mr. Landry.
Go ahead and vote on that one. I have something else after that. Thank you.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Any objection? Hearing none, that add-on has been added on.
Also, on an add-on to the agenda, Mr. McMurray, if we have our liaison group, administrative liaison group meet on Tuesday, December 1st, we would probably like to also give a report from that meeting at our first meeting on December 4th. So I'd like to add that to the agenda, that we hear a report from our liaison, administrative liaison group on the hiring of a new administrator.
Okay. Been properly moved and second. Any discussion? Any objection? Hearing none, that motion carries.
Confusing. And one other thing, Colleen, if you could you call that group for sometime Tuesday around 4 o'clock, if we can, on the 1st? Okay, thank you.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. We adjourn.
First meeting.